Hey everyone, welcome back to Botanic Haven. I'm so glad you're here. If you're new, this is the place where we talk about gardening, taking care of plants, and turning both indoor and outdoor spaces into green, peaceful corners you actually want to spend time in. Whether you've got a tiny balcony, a big backyard, or just a sunny windowsill, there's always something you can grow. And today I want to talk about something that makes gardening way easier, especially if you're busy, tired, or just starting out. We're diving into 30 vegetables that basically grow like weeds. You know, the kind of plants that you almost don't even need to look after, and they still give you food. I'm talking about veggies that pop up, spread a bit, come back next year, and keep feeding you with very little work. These are the plants that even the most I-killed-my-cactus gardeners can grow successfully. And honestly, once you start with a few of these, you'll wonder why you ever stressed over perfect soil, daily watering, and complicated schedules. A few years ago, my friend Daisy told me she wanted to grow her own food, but she was working 2 jobs and had 0 time. She said, "I can't even keep a houseplant alive. How am I supposed to grow vegetables?" So I suggested she start with just 3 things: kale, Swiss chard, and garlic. She planted them in an old wooden crate on her tiny patio, watered them when she remembered, and by summer she was harvesting more than she could eat. Now she's the one giving advice to her neighbours. That's the power of choosing the right plants, the ones that don't need a PhD in gardening. Over time, I've collected a list of about 30 vegetables that are tough, forgiving, and productive with minimal effort. Some of them are perennials, meaning they come back every year. Others are annuals, but they self-seed or spread so easily that they feel like perennials. A lot of them grow in poor soil, survive drought, and even pop up in cracks between paving stones. And the best part? They taste amazing when you finally cook them. Let's start with the classics. Kale is probably the king of low-effort greens. It grows in almost any soil, tolerates cold, heat, and even a bit of shade. I've seen kale plants survive snow, then come back stronger in spring. It doesn't need perfect spacing, and pests usually leave it alone unless it's super stressed. If you plant a few kale plants in spring, you can keep harvesting leaves all summer and into winter. Just pick the outer leaves, and the plant keeps growing. My neighbour Oliver has a patch that's been going strong for 3 years, and he only waters it when it hasn't rained in weeks. Swiss chard is another one that's almost impossible to kill. It looks gorgeous with its colourful stems, red, yellow, pink, even orange, and it tastes mild and slightly sweet. It grows fast, produces a lot, and keeps giving as long as you keep picking. I've had chard plants that survived a light frost, then kept going until the next spring. It's great in stir-fries, soups, and even raw in salads if you pick the young leaves. And the best part? It doesn't need perfect conditions. If your soil is a bit rocky or clay-heavy, chard will still manage. Garlic is another low-maintenance superstar. You plant cloves in the fall, forget about them for months, and then in summer, you dig up a whole bunch of bulbs. No daily watering, no special fertilizer, just a bit of mulch and some patience. I've seen people grow garlic in old tires, in raised beds, and even in the corners of flower beds. It's also great for keeping some pests away from other plants, so it's like a bonus gardener's helper. Onions are similar. Once they're in the ground, they mostly take care of themselves. You can grow them from sets, small bulbs, or from seeds, and they're happy in most soils as long as it's not waterlogged. They don't need constant attention, and they store really well once harvested. My friend Rose grows onions in her small garden and dries them in the sun, then keeps them in mesh bags all winter. She says it's the easiest way to always have fresh onions without buying them. Leeks are like the chill cousin of onions. They grow slowly, but they're tough and don't mind cold weather at all. In fact, they taste better after a light frost. You can leave them in the ground for months and harvest them as you need them. They're perfect for soups, stews, and roasting. I've seen leeks survive snow and still be crisp and tasty when dug up in late winter. Radishes are one of the fastest and easiest vegetables to grow. They're ready in just a few weeks, and they grow in almost any soil. You can plant them in spring, summer, and even early fall. They're great for beginners because you see results so quickly. My nephew Lucas planted his first radishes at age 7, and he was so proud when he pulled them out and saw the bright red roots. Now he's the one reminding me to plant more. Carrots can be a bit fussy if you want perfect straight roots, but if you're okay with slightly crooked or forked ones, they're actually pretty low effort. Just loosen the soil a bit, plant the seeds and keep the area moist until they sprout. After that, they're pretty independent. I've had carrots grow in raised beds, in containers, and even in old compost piles. They're great for snacking, roasting, and adding to soups. Beets are another root veggie that's surprisingly tough. They grow in poor soil, tolerate some shade, and keep producing as long as you don't let them get too big. The leaves are edible too. They taste like spinach and are great in salads or sautéed. I've seen beets pop up in places where I didn't even plant them, thanks to seeds that dropped and came back the next year. Turnips are often forgotten, but they're one of the easiest root vegetables. They grow fast, tolerate cold, and both the roots and the greens are edible. In colder climates, they're often planted in late summer for a fall or winter harvest. My friend Ivy grows them in her small garden and uses the greens in stir-fries and the roots in stews. She says they're the most reliable winter veggie she has. Parsnips are like the winter version of carrots. They're planted in spring, but they're usually harvested after the first frost, when they become sweeter. They don't need much care once established, and they store really well in the ground or in a cool, dark place. I've had parsnips that stayed in the soil all winter and were still good in early spring. Potatoes are a bit more work than some of the others, but they're still a great choice for low-effort farming. You can grow them in bags, containers, or directly in the ground. Once they're planted and hilled up, they mostly take care of themselves. They're also very productive. A few plants can give you a lot of food. I've seen people grow potatoes in old compost heaps and still get a decent harvest. Sweet potatoes are a bit different. They love heat and need a long growing season. But once they're established, they're very low maintenance. They spread like ground cover, suppress weeds, and produce a lot of food. In warmer climates, they're one of the most productive and easy to grow vegetables. Tomatoes are a bit more demanding, but there are varieties that are much easier than others. Heirloom and open pollinated types often adapt better to local conditions and come back from dropped seeds. If you grow them in a sunny spot with decent soil and a bit of support, they'll give you tons of fruit with minimal care. I've seen tomato plants survive drought, pests, and even being forgotten for weeks, then still produce a good harvest. Peppers, especially hot peppers, are often very tough. They can handle heat, drought, and poor soil better than many other vegetables. Once they're established, they keep producing for months. I've had pepper plants that survived mild winters and came back the next year, acting almost like perennials. Eggplants are similar. They love heat and sun, but once they're growing, they're pretty independent. They don't need constant attention, and they produce a lot of fruit if they get enough sun. In warm climates, they can be grown as perennials in protected spots. Cucumbers are fast-growing and very productive. They like sun and water, but once they're established, they can handle some neglect. They're great for trellises or letting sprawl on the ground. I've seen cucumber vines take over a corner of a garden and still produce tons of fruit with very little care. Zucchini and other summer squash are famous for being super productive, sometimes too productive. They grow fast, spread out, and keep giving as long as you keep harvesting. They're great for stir-fries, baking, and even freezing. I've had zucchini plants that survived pests, drought, and being stepped on, and still produced a huge harvest. Pumpkins and winter squash are similar. They need space to spread, but they're very low maintenance once they're growing. They're great for storing and eating all winter. I've seen pumpkin vines grow in compost piles and still produce big, healthy fruits. Green beans, especially pole beans, are very easy to grow. They climb up supports, produce a lot, and keep giving for weeks. Bush beans are even simpler. Just plant, water a bit, and harvest. They're great for beginners and very forgiving. Peas are another cool season crop that's very easy to grow. They like cool weather, don't need perfect soil, and produce a lot of food in a short time. They're great for trellises or letting climb on fences. I've seen pea plants grow in poor soil and still give a good harvest. Lettuce and other salad greens are surprisingly tough if you choose the right varieties. Loose-leaf types are much easier than heading lettuces. They grow fast, tolerate some shade, and keep producing if you keep picking. I've had lettuce plants survive heat, cold, and pests and still give me fresh greens for months. Spinach is another leafy green that's very low effort. It grows fast in cool weather, doesn't need perfect soil, and keeps producing if you keep harvesting. It's great for salads, smoothies, and cooking. I've seen spinach plants pop up in places where I didn't even plant them, thanks to self-seeding. Arugula is one of the easiest salad greens. It grows fast, tolerates poor soil, and has a nice peppery flavour. It's great in salads, sandwiches, and as a garnish. I've had arugula plants that self-seeded and came back the next year without any work. Mustard greens are another tough leafy green. They grow fast, tolerate heat and cold, and have a spicy, peppery taste. They're great in stir-fries, soups, and even raw in salads if you like a strong flavour. I've seen mustard greens survive pests and still produce a lot of leaves. Collard greens are like the southern cousin of kale. Tough, productive, and very low maintenance. They grow well in heat and cold, don't mind poor soil, and keep producing for months. They're great for cooking and storing. Bok choy and other Asian greens are surprisingly easy to grow. They grow fast, don't need perfect conditions, and are great in stir-fries and soups. I've had bok choy plants that survived heat and still produce tender, tasty leaves. Cabbage is a bit slower, but once it's established, it's very low effort. It tolerates cold, doesn't mind poor soil, and stores very well. I've seen cabbage plants survive pests and still produce good heads. Broccoli and cauliflower are a bit more demanding, but there are varieties that are much easier than others. If you grow them in a sunny spot with decent soil and a bit of protection from pests, they'll give you a good harvest with minimal care. Brussels sprouts are surprisingly tough. They grow slowly, but they tolerate cold very well and keep producing for months. They're great for roasting and storing. Cauliflower is a bit more fussy, but there are hardy varieties that do well with minimal care. If you grow them in a sunny spot with decent soil and a bit of protection from pests, they'll give you a good harvest. Kohlrabi is one of the easiest brassicas. It grows fast, doesn't mind poor soil, and both the stem and the leaves are edible. It's great in salads, stir-fries, and even raw as a snack. Celery is often seen as difficult, but there are varieties that are much easier than others. If you grow it in a sunny spot with consistent moisture and decent soil, it can be very productive with minimal care. Fennel is another vegetable that's surprisingly tough. It grows well in poor soil, tolerates drought, and both the bulb and the leaves are edible. It's great in salads, soups, and as a garnish. Asparagus is a perennial that takes a few years to establish, but once it's going, it's very low maintenance. It comes back every year, produces a lot of spears, and can last for decades with very little care. Rhubarb is another perennial that's very easy to grow. It comes back every year, tolerates cold, and produces a lot of stalks. It's great for pies, jams, and desserts. Artichokes are a bit more demanding, but in the right climate, they can be very productive with minimal care. They're great for roasting and eating as a vegetable. Okra is a heat-loving vegetable that's very low maintenance once it's established. It grows fast, produces a lot, and is great for soups, stews, and frying. Malabar spinach is a climbing vine that's perfect for hot climates. It grows like a weed, produces tons of leaves, and is great in stir-fries and soups. New Zealand spinach is another heat-tolerant leafy green. It grows slowly at first, but once it's going, it's very productive and low maintenance. Water spinach, kangkong, is a fast-growing aquatic or semi-aquatic vegetable. It grows like a weed in warm, wet conditions and is great in stir-fries and soups. Amaranth greens are another very easy-to-grow leafy green. They grow fast, tolerate poor soil, and are great in stir-fries and soups. Purslane is a succulent weed that's actually a very nutritious vegetable. It grows like a weed in warm weather, tolerates drought, and is great in salads and stir-fries. Lamb's quarters is another edible weed that's very easy to grow. It pops up everywhere, grows fast, and the young leaves are great in salads and cooking. If this guide has helped you, write one in the comments. And if not, write 0. This way I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Now let's talk about how to actually use these plants in a real low-effort garden. The key is not to try to grow everything at once. Start with just a few of these super easy vegetables, maybe kale, chard, garlic, radishes, and 1 or 2 others that grow well in your climate. Plant them in a sunny spot, prepare the soil a bit, just loosen it, and maybe add some compost if you have it, and then let them do their thing. One of the biggest mistakes new gardeners make is overcomplicating things. They think they need perfect soil, daily watering, and constant weeding. But with these weed-like vegetables, you can actually be a bit lazy and still get great results. Water when the soil feels dry, mulch to keep moisture in and weeds down, and just enjoy watching them grow. Another tip, let some of these plants self-seed. For example, if you grow arugula, mustard greens, or radishes, let a few plants go to seed at the end of the season. The seeds will drop, and next year you'll have new plants without having to plant anything. It's like nature's own gardening system. Companion planting can also help. For example, planting garlic or onions near other vegetables can help keep some pests away. Growing tall plants like corn or sunflowers can give shade to heat-sensitive greens in summer, and letting some plants spread, like squash or sweet potatoes, can help suppress weeds. Mulching is another simple trick that makes a big difference. A layer of straw, leaves, or grass clippings around your plants helps keep the soil moist, reduces weeds, and slowly adds nutrients as it breaks down. You don't need anything fancy, just whatever organic material you have on hand. And don't forget about containers and small spaces. Many of these low-effort vegetables grow very well in pots, grow bags, or even old buckets. If you've only got a balcony or a tiny yard, you can still grow a surprising amount of food. Just make sure the container has good drainage and is in a sunny spot. Finally, remember that gardening is supposed to be fun, not stressful. If a plant dies, it's not the end of the world. If you forget to water for a week, most of these tough vegetables will survive. The goal is to grow food with as little effort as possible, not to win a prize for the perfect garden. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or just want to grow more food without spending hours every day on it, try focusing on these 30 vegetables that grow like weeds. Start small, choose a few that suit your climate and space, and let them do most of the work. You'll be surprised how much you can harvest with very little effort. And hey, if this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments. And if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden.